The morning of my brother's wedding, I stood in the parking lot of the venue, a renovated barn outside of Asheville, North Carolina, that my parents had rented for $40,000, and stared at a notification on my phone. A direct deposit. $112,000. The final payment from a content licensing deal I had closed the week before. I slid my phone back into my clutch, smoothed the skirt of my bridesmaid dress, and walked inside to smile for photographs. Nobody in that building had any idea. My name is not important right now. What matters is that for 6 years, my family called what I did playing on the internet. My mother said it at Thanksgiving. My father said it at Christmas. My brother said it every single time he introduced me to someone new. This is my sister. She does the blog thing. He would make little air quotes with his fingers. Every time. Even when I was 28 years old and had been doing the blog thing long enough to know exactly what I was doing. I started my content business when I was 22, fresh out of UNC Chapel Hill with a communications degree, and absolutely zero interest in the corporate job my parents had already picked out for me. My father had spent 30 years in commercial real estate. My mother managed the regional office of an insurance firm. They had a very specific idea of what a career looked like, and it involved a salary, a 401(k), and a business card with a company logo on it. I had a laptop and a WordPress account. The first 2 years were genuinely hard. I am not going to sit here and pretend I was crushing it from the beginning, because I was not. I wrote a personal finance blog targeting women in their 20s. Budgeting, student loan repayment, building credit, and for the first 18 months I made enough money to cover my phone bill and not much else. I was living in a studio apartment in Durham, working part-time at a coffee shop 4 days a week, and spending every free hour I had writing, learning SEO, figuring out affiliate marketing, cold emailing brands for sponsorship deals that mostly went nowhere. My parents knew about the coffee shop. They did not know I was building something. When I would visit home, my mother would ask if I had thought about applying to the communications department at my father's company. My father would leave job listings on the kitchen counter, printed out, with certain lines highlighted. Once he highlighted the salary range and circled it. I remember picking it up and reading it and thinking, I made more than that last month. I said nothing. I put the paper back down and asked if anyone wanted more coffee. The thing about my family is that they were not cruel people. They were not trying to hurt me. They genuinely believed they were helping, and that distinction used to matter to me a lot. I spent years holding on to it, using it to justify going home for the holidays, using it to explain away the comments, using it to tell myself that being dismissed by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most was just something you absorbed and moved past. I was good at absorbing things. By the time I was 25, I had paid off all $31,000 of my student loans. I did it in 3 years, which, according to the very blog I was running, put me in approximately the top 4% of borrowers in terms of repayment speed. I did not announce this to my family. I mentioned it once, casually, during a Sunday dinner, and my mother said, "Well, that's good, but you really should be thinking about stability. What happens if the internet changes?" My father nodded. My brother, who was sitting across from me with his fiancée Courtney, said, "Yeah, I mean, it could just disappear overnight, right?" He was not asking a real question. He was performing agreement for the table, which was something he had always been very good at. I remember looking at Courtney, who was sweet and a little nervous and clearly trying to figure out the family dynamic she was marrying into, and thinking, she has no idea what she's watching right now. My brother's name is Ryan. He is 3 years older than me. Growing up, Ryan was the one who did everything right. Varsity soccer, student council, a business degree from NC State. He went directly into sales after graduation, worked his way up to a regional manager position at a medical device company, and proposed to Courtney on the rooftop of a restaurant in Charleston on her birthday. My parents talked about that proposal for 6 months. My mother had the photo framed. Ryan was their story of success. I was the cautionary tale they were still waiting to resolve. The distance between us had been growing for years before any of this came to a head. It was subtle at first. The way he stopped asking about my work at family gatherings. The way he would redirect conversations toward Courtney's job or his own promotion whenever I started talking about something I was building. I told myself it was just the natural drift of adult siblings with different lives. I told myself it was not intentional. I kept telling myself that for a long time. About 8 months before the wedding, Ryan called me. This was unusual. We texted occasionally, birthday messages, Saturday logistics, but phone calls were rare enough that I actually stepped outside of a coffee meeting to take it. He said he wanted to catch up. He said he felt like we had drifted. He said Courtney had pointed out that the two of us barely had a real conversation anymore, and she thought it would be nice if we were closer before the wedding. I was genuinely moved by that call. I told him I felt the same way. We talked for almost an hour. What followed over the next few months looked, from the outside, like a reconciliation. He started texting more. He asked questions about my business, real questions, not dismissive ones. When I mentioned that I had recently expanded into brand consulting, helping small businesses build their content strategy, he seemed actually interested. He asked how I found clients. He asked what my process looked like. He asked whether I thought someone with his sales background could ever do something similar. I told him everything. I am not naive. I want to be clear about that. I have been running a business for 6 years. I understand that information has value. But this was my brother. This was someone I had known my entire life. Someone I had shared a house and a childhood and a last name with. Someone whose opinion of me I had spent years quietly grieving. When he started showing genuine interest, I did not run a risk assessment. I just answered his questions. I sent him frameworks I had built. I walked him through my client intake process on a video call that lasted nearly 2 hours. At one point he said, "You're really good at this, you know that?" And I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a very long time. 4 months later, I found out he had launched a consulting business. A mutual friend from college sent me the link. A professionally designed website, a LinkedIn announcement, a list of services that was, in several places, word for word identical to the service descriptions on my own site. The positioning was the same. The target client profile was the same. The onboarding language was the same. I sat at my desk for a long time after I read it, and then I opened a blank document and started writing down every specific thing I recognized, and where I recognized it from. It took me 40 minutes to fill 3 pages. I called my friend back and asked her to forward me everything she had found. Then I called my attorney. This was not the first time I had worked with an intellectual property attorney. When you run a content business, you learn quickly that your written processes, your frameworks, your proprietary systems, these are assets. I had a client services agreement that included confidentiality clauses. I had time-stamped documentation of every framework I had developed. I had the email chain between Ryan and me, the video call recordings I kept as a business practice, the screen shares where I had walked him through materials that were clearly marked with my business name. My attorney's first question was whether Ryan had signed anything. He had not. My attorney's second question was whether I had sent him materials marked proprietary or confidential. I had. Several of them, embedded in a shared folder I had given him access to, for what I believed was a brotherly education, not a business extraction. She told me I had a case. I want to tell you that I felt righteous and clear-headed about all of it, but that is not true. What I actually felt for about 2 weeks was a specific kind of grief that I do not have a clean word for. It is the grief of having wanted something, closeness, belief, a brother who finally saw you, and realizing the wanting had been used against you. It is not anger exactly. It is heavier than anger. It sits in a different part of your body. I called my parents during those 2 weeks. I told them what I had found. I was calm. I had the documentation open in front of me, and I walked them through it the same way I would walk a client through a problem. My father said maybe it was a coincidence. My mother said Ryan had always been interested in business, and maybe he had just come up with similar ideas on his own. I stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, because I had made myself promise I would give them the chance to actually hear me. Then, I got off the phone, sat on my kitchen floor for a little while, and made a few decisions. The first decision was that I was going to pursue the legal matter, regardless of what it cost the family dynamic. My attorney sent Ryan a cease and desist. He removed the identical language from his website within 48 hours, which told me everything I needed to know about whether it had been a coincidence. The second decision was that I was still going to attend the wedding. This surprised people, including my attorney, who asked me gently whether I was sure. I was sure. Not because I had forgiven anyone, not because I wanted to perform normalcy for the sake of family photos. I was going because Courtney had not done anything wrong, and I liked Courtney. And she was about to spend the rest of her life entangled in the same family dynamic that had shaped my entire career trajectory, and I thought she deserved at least one person there who was attending out of genuine care for her. The rehearsal dinner was held at my parents' house. My mother had done the whole thing: string lights in the backyard, catered barbecue from a place in town, a slideshow of Ryan growing up that played on a loop on the screen she had rented. I watched the slideshow for a while. There were 2 photos of me in it, both from when I was a child. Ryan and I did not speak at the rehearsal dinner. We exchanged the kind of eye contact that communicates everything without requiring words. He knew what I knew. We both understood that we were in a suspension period, the weekend operating as a temporary ceasefire. At the wedding itself, I was professional. I walked down the aisle in the dress Courtney had chosen, a dusty rose that I would not have picked, but that actually looked fine. And I stood at the altar and smiled at the right moments and held my bouquet at the correct height, because I had been to enough events to know how to be present in my body while my mind was elsewhere. The reception was when things shifted. The venue had a cocktail hour, and then a sit-down dinner, and then dancing. My assigned table was with Ryan's college friends and their spouses, people I barely knew. At some point during dinner, one of them asked me what I did, and I told him. He asked more questions, real ones, curious ones, and I answered. By the end of that conversation, 2 other people at the table had pulled out their phones to find my website. One of them worked in HR for a tech company and said they had been looking for exactly the kind of consulting I offered. She asked if she could send me a note on Monday. I said yes. My mother saw me exchanging information with people at the table. She came over after dinner and said, in a low voice, "Tonight is about Ryan and Courtney." I told her I was not doing anything wrong. She said, "You're talking about your business at your brother's wedding." I said, "Someone asked what I do," and I answered. She walked away. The speeches were next. Ryan's best man gave one. The maid of honor gave one. My mother gave one that made half the room cry. My father gave one that was mostly a timeline of Ryan's professional achievements, delivered with the measured pride of a man who had never quite figured out how to say "I love you" without listing accomplishments. I had also been asked to give a toast. Short, my mother had said. 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. Nothing that takes attention away from them. I kept it to 45 seconds. I said something true. That Courtney was the most emotionally honest person I had watched my brother interact with, and that I hoped that honesty would keep them both brave. I meant it. A few people told me afterward it was the best speech of the night, which was not the point, but I noted it. It was after the dancing started that Ryan found me near the bar. He did not lead with an apology. He led with explanation, which I had expected. He said he had not meant to copy my work, that he had just been inspired, that he had internalized so much of what I shared, that he could not always tell where my ideas ended and his began. He said the word inspired 3 times in 4 sentences. I let him finish. Then I told him that I understood what inspiration felt like. And what I had read on his website was not it. I told him that I was not going to make a scene at his wedding, and I was not going to stop the legal process. And I hoped that over time we would be able to figure out what kind of relationship we actually had. I kept my voice even. I had been saving my even voice for this conversation for 3 months. He asked if I was really going to go through with the legal action. I said yes. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You know, this is why they never took your business seriously. You turn everything into a fight." I had prepared for this too, I said. They didn't take my business seriously before any of this. That's actually what made all of this possible. I picked up my drink and walked back to the dance floor. In the weeks after the wedding, the situation moved through its expected stages. Ryan's attorney reached out. There were negotiations. The language in question had already been removed from his site, and he had not yet launched formally, so the concrete damages were limited. We settled without going to court. A written acknowledgement, a formal agreement that he would not use any materials derived from our conversations, and a payment that covered my legal fees, plus a sum I will not disclose, but that felt proportionate. My parents did not speak to me for 6 weeks after the wedding. I would be lying if I said that did not hurt. It hurt in the old way. The way things hurt when you have been hoping for a different ending for so long that the hoping itself has become a habit. When my mother finally called, she said she had been thinking. She said she had gone back through the conversation she and I had when I first told them about Ryan's website, and she had read it differently the second time. She said she thought she and my father had not given me the same benefit of the doubt they would have given Ryan in the same situation. She said it quietly, like she was not entirely sure she was ready to finish saying it. I waited. She said, "I think we've spent a lot of years not really understanding what you were building." I told her that was probably true. She asked if she could come visit. I said yes. She drove up 2 weekends later, and we spent a Saturday afternoon going through my business. The actual numbers, the client list, the way the revenue had grown year over year since that first 18 months, when I was barely covering my phone bill. She sat at my kitchen table with her reading glasses on and went through it all carefully. The way she approached things she was taking seriously. At the end of it she said, very simply, "I'm proud of you. 6 years." That was what it took to hear that sentence. I am not telling you this story because I want you to feel sorry for me, or because I want you to think my family is made up of bad people. I am telling it because I think a lot of people recognize the particular experience of building something real in a room where no one believes it is real. And I think there is value in saying out loud, "You can do it anyway." The not being believed does not have to stop you. It does not have to define the end of the story. Ryan and I have a formal distance now that I think is probably permanent. We see each other at family events. We are polite. I have no desire to revisit what happened, and I do not think he does either. That chapter has a cover on it. What I do not have is the version of my brother. I thought I was getting back during those months, when he was calling and asking questions and making me feel, briefly, like we were going to be okay. I am more careful with that now. With the wanting. What I have instead is a business that cleared $400,000 in revenue last year, a client list that has grown almost entirely through referral, and a contract sitting on my desk right now for a content licensing deal that, when it closes, will be the largest single payment I have ever received. The woman from Ryan's wedding reception, the one in HR, sent me a note that Monday. We signed a 6-month consulting agreement in October. She referred me to 2 other people inside her company. One of those referrals turned to an annual retainer. That is how this actually works. Not in a blaze. Not in a moment where everyone suddenly sees you and admits they were wrong. It works in Monday morning emails and referral chains and the slow accumulation of proof that does not need anyone else's permission to be real. My mother asks about the business now, every time we talk. Real questions. The kind she used to ask about Ryan's sales numbers. I answer them. We are figuring out a new version of each other, and it is not seamless, but it is honest. And I have decided that honest is enough. I still have that notification saved in my camera roll, the one from the parking lot at the wedding, $112,000, time-stamped 10:47 a.m., while the florist was still arranging centerpieces inside, and my brother was getting his tie adjusted, and my mother was worrying about whether the appetizers would run out. I look at it sometimes, not because I need the validation anymore, but because I want to remember what it felt like to know something about yourself that the room around you has not figured out yet. And to understand that the room catching up is not actually the point. The point is the knowing.